welcome to Faith and Sustainability, a podcast where we look deeper into how our faith traditions inspire us to care for our common home. I'm your host, Leonard Robinson.
And I'm Kat Doyle, your co-host. This podcast is made possible from the generous support of Jamie Lanier, the Varlamov Family Foundation, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, St. Francis Services, and Semco Atlanta. Okay, Leonard, I'm pretty excited to dive in to today's topic. I think it's going to be pretty thought-provoking. Who do we have with us?
Today, we have a distinguished guest. We have Dr. Arun Agrawal, professor at Notre Dame University. He serves as the inaugural director of the Just Transformations to Sustainability Initiative. He brings a unique perspective on how faith and faith-based organizations play a vital role in addressing environmental challenges. Arun, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure and honor. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about your academic background and how you really got involved in sustainability in the first place?
Maybe I'll start with a bit of a personal background. I grew up in a small town in a middle-class family in India, in a part of the country that perhaps is closest to Appalachia, both in terms of its low material endowments, but also in terms of how close people are to land and to nature. The town in which I grew up had very limited educational opportunities. So I lived at home for a bit, but I also lived with my aunts and uncles outside of my town, in places where there were better schools. And I also went to a boarding school before going to college and getting an MBA. My grandfather grew vegetables and had fruit trees at home, and all of us children, we were a big joint family of maybe 20 people living in the same house. We would eye these fruits for their mangoes and guavas and papayas and lychees and all kinds of tropical berries. And when I think back of my beginnings, I think of this as part of my childhood, and also informing my understanding of what it means to be close to land and to nature. And I think some of this translated into the work I did for both my undergraduate and my graduate degrees, and how I became much more invested in and interested in sustainability. I got a degree in history and then a degree in management, but wasn't really happy with the idea of working in the private sector. I came to the US to get a PhD, working with Elinor Ostrom, Margaret McKean, Robert Bates at Duke University and Indiana University. Lynn Ostrom went on to get a Nobel Prize in economics for her work on the environment, and a lot of what she did and how she thought about the environment continues to influence me to this day, not to mention the influence of many other mentors and researchers with whom I have had the privilege of working over the last 25, 30 years of my life.
It's really interesting to me that you kind of look back and say that living and understanding the land really drove where you went with your degree. And I'm not sure many people make that connection today. Would you say that those ties to the land are what nudged you or maybe even dramatically pushed you into this work?
I definitely think that is true for me, without making the claim that such an experience is necessary for people to have a relationship with sustainability, or for them to care about nature, environment, and sustainability. I do think of sustainability as being much broader than just the environment or just nature. And I say just nature and just environment, while, of course, it's not just nature, it's not just environment. These are themselves enormous categories that inform both our thinking and our lives. So I think people come to sustainability from many different experiences and many different ways of living their childhoods, and often without even thinking what exactly those relationships are. But in my case, certainly, when I think about sustainability, I do think of my grandfather. I do think of all my mentors, the ways in which they helped me become who I am today.
Well, tell me, you started in India, and now you're in Indiana, at Notre Dame. How did you get to Notre Dame doing what you're doing?
When we look back on our lives, we tell ourselves stories that make total sense. But when we look forward and we look ahead, we have no idea what's going to happen. So, if I think about this little kid growing up in a large middle class family in a small town in Bihar in India, I just cannot tell you that anything in my mind at that time could have predicted that I'll end up at Notre Dame working on sustainability and leading the sustainability initiative that Notre Dame has just launched. But I think what happens is that at any given point, you see certain opportunities or what you think of as opportunities, or you end up doing things that just seem the right thing to do. And being open to different possibilities or to different ways of understanding what one is meant to do helps guide one into the right thing to do. And for that, it is critical the experiences that one has had, what one has learned from one's mentors, the way one has become a person is critical to end up where we are. And I think that's maybe the best story I can tell, because if I look back, I could say, oh, then this happened, and then this happened, and this all makes perfect sense. But at the point that these things happened, there was no connection that I can draw carefully between having gotten a PhD at Duke University in political science and then becoming somebody who cares really deeply about sustainability and wants to work for the rest of my life on advancing both thinking and action and outcomes towards sustainability. I think that relationship would be very hard to connect, to identify.
So Notre Dame, Catholic University, this is a Catholic initiative. Maybe tell us a little bit about how your faith journey intersected with this Catholic initiative that you're working on.
So before I answer your question directly, I will say that yes, Notre Dame is a very deeply Catholic university, but I have not felt that Notre Dame, either its decision makers or higher administration, demand fealty to Catholicism for engaging with researchers or scholars or those who care about the same ultimate goals as a condition of bringing somebody to Notre Dame. But having said that, I do want to talk a little bit about my personal faith journey. Even though it is not deeply inflected or deeply informed by Catholicism, Catholicism did play a role in how I became who I am. I remember today my mom and my aunt singing hymns and songs of praise to different Hindu gods and goddesses. I remember reading lots of religious texts, which are also in India cultural texts, just for fun, just because they were such great stories. I also remember reading a lot of different ways of thinking about religion. My grandfather was Jain, my parents were Hindus, I had lots of friends who were Buddhists and Christians and Muslims. I went to Jesuit schools for my education. An Anglican, a school run by the Anglican Church in Darjeeling for my high school. So even though I don't think of myself as a devout religious person, these different interactions with many different religions, I feel, have left an imprint on me. From Hinduism, the idea of salvation, which is partly about deliverance from the cycle of birth and rebirth, but it's also partly about achieving union with the force that has made us all. It's both masculine and feminine. There's also the idea that you can achieve this union through different paths, through the path of action, through the path of knowledge, through love and devotion. And Hinduism doesn't say that any one of these paths is the most appropriate or the best or the most superior in pursuing that goal or that objective of connecting with the Supreme Being. It also identifies the presence of God not just in humans, but in other living creatures and in all of creation, even those parts of creation that are not animate. So I feel that all of these ways of learning from different religions, from learning from different faith traditions have informed how I think about sustainability. And the most important part of that is that we can work with people who are different from us. We can connect with people who are different from us because ultimately we want the same things. Ultimately, we are interested in doing good. And I understand that not everybody thinks about what is good in the same way. And there are in many cases, intransigent and often very difficult to overcome differences among people. But to believe in the essential possibility of people doing the right thing, I think is the fundamental basis for being able to think about sustainability and a world which is just and sustainable with any amount of hope. Because if we don't do that, we would be cynical and we would find it very hard to do and to continue to do what we think is really the thing that we must all do, which is to make the world and make the future a better place for all of us.
Was there an aha moment where your faith and your path to sustainability intersected?
Yeah, I would say probably much more on the normal side, and maybe not a single aha moment, but several such moments. For example, after I finished my MBA, I decided that I really couldn't see myself working in the private sector, and I went around traveling in India for a year and encountered a whole series of environmental movements where people were trying to protect trees, trying to protect forests, very deeply informed by traditions in Hinduism and Buddhism, and understanding how these activists saw in what they were doing and in nature a reflection of God and of different gods and goddesses and of supreme beings really helped me understand a little bit better how we connect with environment and with nature. I had the occasion, when I read, I would say one other aha moment, which is much more recent. I was part of a transformative change assessment, which is a global effort to understand how to bring about transformative change for a just and sustainable world. And we came to the conclusion that the way to do that is through influencing our own and others' views and structures and practices. And this brought to me Pope Francis's teaching in Laudato Si, where he sees sustainability requiring a shift in thoughts, structures, and actions. And this was an aha moment in the sense, here is Pope Francis saying in 2014, 2015, how to bring about sustainability through shifts in thoughts, structures, and actions. And here we are, 100 scientists working with the best available science to think about how to bring about sustainability, and we say views, structures, and practices, which to me is the same as thoughts, structures, and actions. So in 2015, Pope Francis said something that we scientists arrived at a decade later. And I thought, my goodness, we didn't have to do all this work. We could have just read the Laudato Si more than once, and he would have come to the same conclusion. That was an aha moment for me as well.
I love that moment. I think that speaks volumes to all of us doing this work. So Pope Francis has said this, and a group of 100 scientists have said this. So what does your work look like? What is it that you're doing?
At this point, I'm still figuring out, Kat, exactly what I will do. I just arrived at Notre Dame in January, and a lot of what I'm doing is listening to people and talking to people and trying to get a deeper sense of what it is that people here want, that my colleagues and my students and my and decision makers at the university want. And I think what they want is all the same thing, which is for Notre Dame to really create an effort towards sustainability that is distinctive. It's distinctive in the sense which is informed by Notre Dame's commitment to Catholic social teaching and to realizing a vision of sustainability as Pope Francis has imagined it. Working closely with the Vatican on this to the extent that these efforts at working closely are welcome. At connecting the educational and the research mission of the university with action and change on the ground by working with partners who have greater capacity and greater knowledge of how to bring about change. But building partnerships that are real partnerships, where we don't think of ourselves as leaders or we don't think of ourselves as the ones calling the shots, but we think of ourselves as being in an equal status where the partners bring complementary strengths and skills to the work that we are all committed to, which is striving for a different, for a better, for a more sustainable and just world. And I say that even as I see so much of our current context not being all that hospitable to that goal. But I think Notre Dame's commitment to that goal is real. And I think Notre Dame wants me and wants the Just Transformations to Sustainability Initiative to work towards that goal. So there are many areas of excellence on sustainability at Notre Dame. Part of my work is to think about how to connect them and how to build action partnerships. There is an effort to build stronger relationships between Notre Dame and partners outside of academia and outside of the research world. But there is also an emphasis on thinking through how we can make ourselves better by working with those in other universities, those in other research networks, and not just in the United States, but also outside the US. So the work I'm doing is on many different fronts. For the most part, right now, it is trying to imagine what shape this work will take.
What do you see the role of faith and faith-based organizations in sustainability?
That's a deep question, Leonard. I would say, there are those who think that faith and sustainability, or at least one's faith or personal faith and the goal of achieving sustainability scientifically are in tension. And to my mind, that is simply not the right way to think about it. And it's not the right way to think about it because sustainability is both a science and a call for action. It calls for us to understand what's the best way to advance sustainability, but then for us to act on that understanding. And I think in that sense, the relationship that the science of sustainability has with the call that Pope Francis has for advancing integral ecology and integral human development are very tightly connected. The generations of suspicion and skepticism that scientists have had in relation to faith, I think, are not the right way to think about what science has and what faith can contribute to bringing about sustainability.
You're singing our song here. You're saying the things that our local Laudato Si initiative is talking about. So pretty profound stuff that you've laid on the table for us to think about today. Thank you for kind of broadening our lens even a little bit more.
I think we are all singing the same song, Kat, because I really do believe that those of us who care about sustainability are ready to go and act and not just to talk and think.
Thank you very much for coming on the show. Your insights are enriching, and we're so grateful you could join us. It just gave, for me, being a USC alumni, it made me look at Notre Dame in a different light.
We are going to convert you yet, Leonard.
Bring your lunch. Okay.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure having had this conversation.
All right, to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Faith and Sustainability. We hope you've been inspired by today's conversation. Stay connected with us on social media and share your journey with the hashtag Faith and Sustainability.
And don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast. So, Leonard, we look forward to meeting again next time
at the intersection of faith and sustainability.
The preceding podcast is a production of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Atlanta. Copyright 2025.